We've reached the point of our agenda that we are ready for public comment. But before we do public comment, I just wanted to say a couple of things because honestly, right now, looking out at the crowd, I can't tell you what I'm thinking, but I did want to make it clear that this is a public meeting. We have business that needs to be discussed, and we have an agenda that we need to go by. To that end, we do have certain rules, and before we start our public meeting, I just wanted to say that I think probably a lot of you know that on social media there were a lot of comments this past weekend, and we're aware of those comments, and we're aware that some of you are very concerned about ideas that you have and want to be able to express yourself, and we want you to. We're always glad to hear, and we want to hear what everybody has to say during public comment. However, I'd just like to remind everybody that personal attacks and name-calling by anyone will not be tolerated. We'll deal with it if it happens, but I will just kind of warn you if we get to the point where it gets a little bit out of hand, and I'm not expecting that to happen, but I do want to make sure that I'm clear. I also wanted to let you know that booing and shouting, threatening, or jeering will also not be tolerated. And if it gets out of hand, I will adjourn the meeting. So, having said all those things, which doesn't start off on maybe the right foot for some of you, I did want to tell you that we are thrilled that you are here and you're participating in our meeting. And if you have a public comment to make, please come forward. You have a 3-minute limit. And please identify yourself and what part of Madison you live in. Thank you.
Acapella for us?
First of all, kudos to your opening statements on having the public forum. You're spot on. My name's Lisa Davis from Locustdale. Tonight I want to talk about the social emotional learning, SEL. Now, it's supposed to be a tool to help students' academic achievement and also personal fulfillment, as I understand it. I'm still learning and reading on how the SEL program is reliably being measured for its efficiency. Now, if Madison County schools are using digital platforms for students to determine many of their sensitive traits, has any consent by the students or their parents been done, or is it even required to? Now, I ask this because of Virginia's definition of SEL. I understand this has been around in our schools a few years. So, how do you collect the data, measure it, and analyze it for student improvement? And where can this be found? I have searched the various school websites but have not found anything specific, but I may have missed it. I understand that CASEL or CASEL is being used, and it has 5 competencies: self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, relationship skills, and decision-making. Now, it sounds more like the SEL is using a one-size-fits-all approach for students. Now, one thing that is interesting is that the Virginia Department of Education was soliciting public opinion for use in SEL standards last year. 62% of the comments were against it, 62%. Also, their 20 May 2021 Learn the Role of Families webcam, they commented on their role to ask students to define their families to include their beliefs and how they handle home situations. One speaker's comments was to have their students point out to their parents when they did not display one of the CASEL core competencies. She said, tell students to avoid confrontation at home and to make fun with the information taught to them, to use a point system posted on the refrigerator or pennies in a jar for their parents when they did not display one of the competencies taught to them at school, like, quote, you're not practicing management today. I have not made any conclusions for or against this method. But it seems like schools are more and more co-parenting with parents and treading the fine line of privacy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mike Charman from the Novum area. Let me toss out a positive name calling and call you all patriots. Because you're giving of yourselves. You care about your county, you care about your area, you care about your families, you care about your country, otherwise you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. And isn't that a wonderful label to be slapped on you, being a patriot? Christopher Wingate, when he was running for this position, one of the major things that he ran upon was one of his slogans or one of his platforms was to be teaching children love of America. And I've always thought that was a pretty important thing. But there's a Quinnipiac University poll that came out March 7th that punctuated how incredibly important it is and how urgent it is right now. So of course the poll is online, you can look it up, Quinnipiac. The question that they asked was, if you were in the same position as Ukrainians are now, do you think that you would stay and fight or leave the country? So if you're in the same positions as the Ukrainians are now, would you stay and fight or leave the country? So, we could talk about the comparison between Republicans and Democrats, independents, men and women, but it's united we stand, right? So that's what matters, is what's the entirety, what's the whole. And the whole was that of everybody polled, 38% would run. 38%. Of those that actually, it would be less theoretical, of those in the 18 to 34 age category, 48% would run. And you might think, well, 52% would stay and fight. No, 45% would, and the others didn't know. What's the most important thing that you can be teaching these children? The young children growing up through elementary and to the middle schoolers, and when did middle school kids get so tall? But into high school. A senior in high school is very often old enough to vote, definitely old enough to fight. I joined the Army when I was 17. But if we aren't willing to stand up for our country, and if we don't have a country that people are willing to stand up and fight for, 48% would rather leave the country than stay and fight. What future do we have for our kids? Because where is there to go? It's interesting that of the ethnic groups, Hispanics were the most likely, 61%, to say they stay and fight. Why is that? Because they either had left a country they didn't want to be in and knew this was better than any other place, or they had friends or families who did. We need to inculcate that. You all need to inculcate that. You patriots who are up there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Cindy Taylor. I live in Wolftown. I want to speak to the equity work, the ongoing equity work.
Ms. Taylor, could you please speak a little closer to the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
I want to speak to the equity work, and I have some things to say that are a little bit difficult to hear, so I apologize. But when I moved here in 2015, I was having lunch with my son at the Mountaineer Cafe that used to be on Main Street. And it happened to be the day that the funeral was being televised for the 9 people who had been murdered by a white supremacist at the AME Emmanuel Church in Charleston. So it was on the TV, and a woman, the server, came up behind my chair, looked up at the TV, and said one of the most racist things I've ever heard in my life, suggesting that, and she didn't know us, the country was a lot better off with 9 fewer Black Americans. And I looked at my son, in shock, and he looked at me, he was 18 years old, and he said, "Wow, welcome to Madison." And, you know, this was not an isolated incident for me. It happened again, that I would hear things like this. So that's why I joined the NAACP a few years ago. I thought, I cannot, you know, see what's happening in our country and what's happening right here in our community and shut my eyes and stand aside and do nothing. I have to do something. 2 years ago, I was volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club here in Madison, and I was working with a group of third graders, and one little boy shouted out, "We need to get all the black people out of this country right now." And he said this, I'm working with this little group, he said this in front of 2 little boys who were white and 1 little girl, 8 years old, who was black. And I can't describe to you the look on her face. It was shock, she froze, I froze, but it was shame. She was ashamed. It was just heartbreaking. And this is where culturally responsive teaching and training and the ongoing equity work would have been so helpful to me as a volunteer and would be to our teachers going forward. I spoke to the director of the Boys and Girls Club after this incident, and she said, "Oh yes, we have learned that is what he hears at home from both of his parents." You know, if we care about this community, we have to stand up and address this. And you, as school board members, have a profound responsibility to address the race-based achievement gaps and the racist culture that we know does persist.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Tom.
Thank you. And it shouldn't be changed from Equity Task Force. It should be Equity Task Force, not the Opportunity Committee. That is disingenuous.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Becky Thompson from Oak Park. And I see on the agenda 12C, you're going to talk about board priorities. And so I have a suggestion for a wording change in board priority number 2. The current wording is as follows. Ensure every student has access to the resources and educational rigor they need at the right moment in their education, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, language, ability, family background, or family income. I suggest that regardless of be changed to taking into consideration their race, gender, ethnicity, etc. For example, if a child's family has low income, that teacher does not teach that child regardless of their financial consideration or financial condition, but taking into consideration their financial condition, perhaps the lack of books, clothing, or nutrition, other conditions at home. If a child speaks Spanish at home, the teacher does not teach that child regardless of their potential difficulty with English, but taking into consideration their potential difficulty with English. And if a child has some hearing loss, wears a hearing aid, the teacher does not teach that child regardless of their hearing loss, but taking into consideration their hearing loss. So thank you for taking this wording change under consideration.
Thank you. No, you can come up. You're welcome.
Thank you.
If you please would state your name and where you're from.
My name is Susan. My name is Susan Corranti. I live at 359 Malvern Drive.
Thank you.
I'm very concerned about the proposal to change the name of I'm concerned about the proposal that the name of the Madison County Schools Equity Task Force be changed to Opportunity Committee, I think it is. I think that the word equity is extremely important. I understand there was some question at the retreat about what equity meant. The definition of equity is an quality of being fair and impartial. The quality of being fair and impartial. Equity of treatment. My husband and I strongly support the work of the Madison Public Schools Equity Task Force and strongly object to Mr. Wingate's proposal to change the name of the task force. We support recruiting a diverse workforce in our schools and find it offensive Mr. Wingate's suggestion at the retreat that supporting equity somehow diminishes the pursuit of excellence. There was some reference to, well, in Charlottesville when they did that, they had to not hire some excellent teachers. The suggestion that if they're hiring African-American teachers, they're not hiring excellent teachers. I think that's extremely insulting. In fact, equity strengthens the pursuit of excellence by leveling the playing field. Perhaps Mr. Wingate and Mr. Sheets' associates would not support anything that referenced equity. But my husband and I, there was a reference that I think by Mr. Wingate, there are associates who would not support anything that said equity in it. Well, my husband and I and our associates and our families certainly understand that equal opportunity does not necessarily result in an equitable outcome. Much more is needed. And I would ask that you keep the name of the task force as it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Frank Lewis. I'm pastor of the Antioch Church. I live on 362 Charman's Mill Road at Radiant. I have 5 lovely grandchildren that's in the Madison County school system. Many associates and other relatives that's a part of it. But I think things that's been said has kind of made me have to say less right now, because I could say ditto to a lot that has been said pertaining to the equity, whatever. But I just somehow find it very appalling and very disturbing that we would find the word equity to be something evil, when it's already been said that it's about fairness and impartiality. So why would we find that to be such a bad word? That's extremely disturbing. And we heard the comment about race issues and things of that nature, and it also appalls me a lot of times when I hear people say we shouldn't bring up race and all that kind of thing. Come on, are we living on different planets or what? Because there's no doubt it makes a difference. I wish it didn't, and I was hoping that we could get, and I thought we were somewhat getting past that, but here we are in 2022 still talking about things that should have been done away with a long time ago. So I'm not here trying to pump up any racial disturbance or anything of that nature, but I think we got to be real about what's really happening in this community, in this state, in this country, and in fact, probably all across the world. So it just really disturbs me to hear these kind of things and to equate equity with indoctrination and partisan politics. What does equity have to do with any of that? I think we're getting some things very twisted about this, and then there was a statement made about the community would never support anything referenced equity. I don't know what community some people living in, because pretty much the Equity Task Force has been going on for a while at the school, and to my knowledge, I never heard nothing about it until it was brought up amongst the school board and school board members. There was no conflict to my knowledge, that anybody was complaining about it or anything. So why did it even come up? And we talking about fairness, we talk about impartiality. So, again, I'll say, why is that such a bad word? And, and also, when we look at equity, we're talking about equal opportunity. So is there a problem with being equal in how we learn? Is there a problem with that? I thought that's what we were really trying to get to. That's the end we were trying to get to.
Thank you,
So-
Reverend Lewis. Time. Yes, sir.
I'm a Baptist preacher, you know, so.
Sorry, 1 second.
Okay.
That mic's about to die. Test.
Good afternoon. My name is Misha Jones. I live on Plymouth Small Road. I'm the mother of 2 children in the Madison County School District. And I'm here because I'm concerned of the work of this board. There is a disconnect of this board with what's actually happening within the school system. I have 2 children who come home every day to report to me about the racial slurs, the middle school, the reenactment of the George Floyd killing on the playgrounds, that the black kids and the white kids can't even play an innocent kickball game together. Instead of this board taking us backward, you should be supporting our educators and our students to say, how can we break this barrier? How can we educate you so you can move forward and so you can be successful in society, because people aren't going to always stay in the walls of Madison County. And what the board wants to do is not help our children. You're holding our children back. It's not an invite. I challenge each and every one of you to take off your blinders. Step away from your political beliefs, because politics does not have anything to do when we educate our children. Take the politics out of it. Put on a fresh pair of eyes. Talk to someone that's not in your community, that's dealing with this every day. Go inside the school system and shadow a teacher for a day to see how they are supporting their students and also dealing with the other nonsense that's preventing our kids from growing. That's my challenge to each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Laurel Blackman, and I'm here on behalf of your local chapter of the NAACP. I have a statement from our education committee. In the counties we serve, Culpeper, Rappahannock, and Madison, we advocate for equity education. Equity education means that as boards, admins, and teachers make decisions, they, 1, examine the opportunity gaps between different groups of students. Often the differentiating factor is race. 2, look closely at the experiences of students of color in your schools, as Misha Jones just referenced. 3, consider how instructional programming encourages critical thinking. And 4, consider how representation of multiple perspectives, including the teaching of art history, is included in the instructional program. Prior to this meeting tonight, we have urged our county school boards to align their work with the comprehensive, high-quality resources that had been available at the state level through the Ed Equity website and the many programs and initiatives that the Virginia Department of Ed had launched. In Madison County, we also have been completely inspired by the work of the Equity Task Force, and especially by the work of teachers and administrators, including Anna Graham, to look critically at the education and achievement of all students. These past months, however, we have seen the state equity programs completely gutted by the Youngkin administration. And here in Madison, we have been so disheartened to see members of this board speak as if equity is irrelevant or divisive, as if it isn't an urgent and critical part of exceptional school systems. So now what? We are here today to ask how you plan to address the inequities in education that are present in Madison County Public Schools. The state equity programs are currently under attack, but that does not change the fact that there are persistent opportunity gaps right here. Let's consider just a sampling of the achievement data collected by Virginia Department of Ed. In 2021, 60% of white Madison County students passed the reading SOL. 29% of black students did. 40% of white students passed the math SOL. Only 10% of black students did. So 2020-2021 was a very hard year for testing, but the 2018-2019 data tell a very similar story. 72% of white students met the reading standards compared to 59% of black students. In math, 81% of white students met the standard, while 56% of black students did. The gaps are glaring, and this is just a sampling of the data that can be used to understand the different academic experiences of students in our schools. There is also data on participation in AP and gifted courses, disciplinary actions, and more. Is this data a part of your decision-making process? Do these numbers drive how you plan for the year? How are you considering the experiences of traditionally underrepresented groups in the schools? Do you know the experiences of these groups beyond numerical data? We know we need equity work, so leaders, what does equity work look like
Excuse
in Madison
me,
County
time.
schools?
Thank you.
Good evening, all, and thank you so much for your service to our schools and to our county. And good evening, those of you who came to listen to this.
Could you identify yourself, please?
I would be delighted to.
Thank you.
My name is Barbara Kress Beach, and I am a resident of Madison and a citizen of the United States. I am a former teacher of high school English in Massachusetts, New York, and Texas. My husband moved around and I moved with him. I was honored to serve as editor of 2 national education magazines, the Journal of Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance, and later of Educational Leadership, the monthly journal of the Association of